Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. We praise Allah Ta'ala and bless Him. And we're thankful and grateful for all of Allah's blessing to us and pray for everyone's health and well-being and your family and all of our community. Ameen. We've been talking for the last several weeks about the Shara'i causes of adaptability in Tashri'ah or in Islamic legislation. That our Islamic laws, or you could call regulations, are flexible and adaptable based on different circumstances. So we talked about al-ikrah, which means when you are forced to do things against your will, that Allah Almighty pardons and forgives when you are unable, because of circumstances beyond your control, to carry out certain rules that are revealed in the Quran or in the Sunnah. And likewise, we talked about the rukhsa al-shar'iyya, where Allah Almighty loves that the person take advantage of the concessions that are given by Allah Ta'ala in the Quran and in the Sunnah. Allah permits us in certain circumstances, He gives us alternatives, and He loves that we should follow those concessions rather than making a burden upon ourselves. And so when you do the thing that Allah loves you to do, that is an act of worship and devotion to Allah Ta'ala. And so if you turn your back on the rukhsa and you don't take advantage of it when it's available, that is not beloved to Allah. And so famous examples like the traveler shortening their prayers, or combining prayers, or breaking the fast in the month of Ramadan, those are famous examples that Allah Almighty gives us those alternatives to make things easy for us. And that's why Allah loves that we should be grateful. And when things are hard or difficult for us, we take advantage of these concessions, and it strengthens our faith and makes us grateful that we have an alternative. And if we were to force ourselves to do things and make them hard for us, although there is an easier alternative, it may be that people end up turning their backs on the religion as a whole. If things are hard for me in times of difficulty, maybe then I'm not even going to practice when things get easier. And so you can understand many examples where people, for example, in times of war and struggle and in difficulty, and instead of praying the full prayers or fasting the fast, they would just set those aside and not do them because of the difficult circumstances. And then they might think in their heart, and Shaitan may put the idea in their head, well, Allah made the religion hard for me. Now that things are easy, I'm not going to do it at all. And so it's really a blessing of Islam that we have these rukhs shar'iyya, these Islamic concessions available to us to make things following our religion easier, inshallah ta'ala. And tonight I want to talk about a third level here in the adaptability of Sharia, of Islamic practices based on different circumstances. And that is embracing change and development over time. Change and development over time are an example of divine revelation. And so rejecting the adaptability and the concept of change over time in our practices of Islam, in our fatwas, is a rejection of some of the basic Islamic concepts and teachings. So the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, narrated to us the hadith. It comes in the form of a Qudsi hadith, in the words of Allah, as well as in the words of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. But it's found in Bukhari and Muslim in the most authentic sources. La taqulu khaybata dahri, finna Allaha huwa dahr. And so the Prophet says, don't curse time, for Allah is time. And in the version, which is a hadith Qudsi, as they would call it, a sacred hadith, that is in the words narrated, in the words of Allah Ta'ala, narrated by Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. Yu'dini ibn Adam, yusub ad-dahr wa ana dahr. The children of Adam, hurt me in their words. They curse time, and I am time. When you look at the Hadith Qudsi, you will often see that those texts often contain words that are clearly anthropomorphic. They clearly have a kind of tashbih. And so it's very clear that they are not supposed to be understood literally. And so here Allah is saying, Ana dahr, I am time. And it doesn't mean Allah is time. Let me clarify that. And so in the famous hadith, the person who approaches Allah Ta'ala by constancy in doing the fara'id, their duties and obligations to Allah Ta'ala, then Allah loves that person. And then they get closer and closer to Allah through nawafil, through supererogatory works, through prayers and worship that is not obligatory. And so they get close to Allah until Allah says, Kuntu sam'ahu alladhi yusma' bi. I became as his ears by which he hears. I became his eyes by which he sees, his hands or their hands by which they hold or grasp, their feet by which they walk. And so, of course, Allah is not your eyes or ears or hand or feet. Allah Ta'ala is saying, when you become close to Allah Ta'ala, Allah guides your eyes, your ears, your hands, your feet, so that you are instinctively following the guidance of Allah Ta'ala without even being aware, consciously aware of it. Another example where Allah said in the Hadith Qudsi, I was sick, you didn't visit me. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. Said, how Allah, you're the Lord of all the worlds, how could you be hungry? My servant was hungry and you didn't feed him. If you fed your brother, I would have been there. If you had visited your brother who is ill, who is sick, you would have found me there already with him. In other words, you would be getting closer to Allah. Allah is waiting at the sick bed, waiting at the gate of the poor person. And so if you were to go to meet them, you are getting close to Allah Ta'ala, you are meeting Allah Ta'ala. So all of those are what we would call anthropomorphic texts. That's called Arabic tashbih. And so, of course, they're not meant to be taken literally. And in the Quran and Hadith, there are multiple hundreds of texts which are not meant to be taken literally, and that's known and understood by any real alim or scholar. And so when people say that, in fact, you've got to take it all literally, that could not be farther from the truth. But if you were to take those texts literally, they would lead you astray. And so what do those texts mean? And so when Allah said, I am your eyes and ears and hands and feet. He's saying that I am guiding your actions. I am the one who is directly guiding your limbs. I'm guiding you in your life, so that almost naturally and unconsciously, you are following the right path and the right guidance. So you became as an instrument directed by Allah Ta'ala. And of course, in the Hadith Qudsi, wherever you were to go to be of service to your fellow human being who is in need, there you will find Allah Ta'ala. You will be close to Allah. We try to get close to Allah through our prayers and fasting and charity, but it's really our love and concern for the stranger, the person in fear and poverty and illness who needs us. That's where we're going to get closer to Allah Ta'ala. So once again, we became an instrument to carry out the will of Allah Ta'ala. So Allah said in the Quran, when you cast the stone, it wasn't you who was casting the stone, it was Allah who was casting the stone. Of course, the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, picked up stones and tossed them, but he was an instrument, so to speak, guided by Allah Ta'ala. What he was doing was under the direct control of Allah Ta'ala. He was an instrument under the control of Allah, and he was in harmony with the will of God. So then, going back to the hadith of ad-dahr, or of time, Allah is not time, he's the creator of time. We are within time, and we experience the world through this creation of Allah Ta'ala. But Allah is above and beyond time. So time is an instrument guided by Allah Ta'ala, carrying out the divine will. And so when we understand this principle, we can understand the principle of change and taghyir in Islamic jurisprudence, in fiqh, inshallah ta'ala. So Allah Almighty brings about change, al-hawadith, things which the philosophers used to call accidents, are things that happen that were not necessary and that had to happen, but they happen through time. So they're secondary things. And so Allah Ta'ala makes things happen to carry out his will. And the things that can happen make time. So we experience events as a chain of causes and effects. And our minds can only process them in a linear fashion. And so we see, if you saw in the old days a movie with film, with an old-fashioned movie projector, with actual real film. So we sit there and watch it from beginning to end in a linear fashion. But in fact, that entire film that we just watched was already, all of it filmed in that tape, already existing. But it was placed in such a way that we could see it unfolding in time. But the causes and effects were already there, laid out. And so this whole universe was created by Allah Ta'ala as a network of causes and effects. And we, within this universe, we experience them one at a time in that linear fashion. And that's why we're unable, despite our advances in science and technology, to get a whole accurate picture of the whole universe in its wholeness and interrelatability, and all of the connections together in the smallest levels to the greatest levels, and how they all work and influence each other. In fact, the computer that could store that information and analyze it would be greater than the whole universe. And so that's really an impossibility. We can't simultaneously have a comprehensive a comprehensive database of all the data of the world in its entirety, in all of its details, and be able to understand the wholeness of the interrelationships of that universe. And so it becomes an impossibility for the human. In understanding the very small levels, we have to sort of turn our back on the bigger picture. And in understanding the bigger picture, we overlook the minor details. And it's just not possible for us really to do it any other way. And so this is the example of the creation of Allah Ta'ala. And I will explain a little bit if we're very patient, inshallah, that the Arabs used to curse time. They would blame time and curse it for everything bad that happened to them. What happens in time? We get sick, we get hurt, and we die. Maybe we lose our money, depressions happen, illnesses, pandemics, disasters, and it all happens in a linear fashion. If I had known what was going to happen, I would have prepared myself. I would have done something different. But of course, none of us can do that. And it's a one-way arrow of time. We can't reverse it and go the other way. And there's a divine wisdom in that. And so famously, there's a concept called entropy, which is at the basis of time, which makes it a one-way phenomenon that we can't reverse. And so when we're kids, I know a lot of times our teachers in school want to take a break, so they show us an educational film of some sort. And we would sit back, we would enjoy it, the teachers would enjoy it, we'd watch a film all day. So they had a film showing the glaciers during the ice ages. And so they showed a man back in riding a canoe in the water, and then suddenly time goes backward and he's rising high in the sky on a glacier. Then they showed the warming of the earth, and the glacier melts, and then his canoe falls down, and he's back in the river and splashes in the river. And then he's floating down the river, and he, of course, these are in pioneer days, he scoops up his cup in the river to drink water, and suddenly it's full of pollution because he's suddenly in the modern days and the rivers have been polluted. So our teachers would do a thing that we love. They would turn that film backwards and we'd watch it backwards. And so the man is in the river, and then suddenly his canoe jumps backwards up the river, up into space, up onto the glacier. And of course, it looks ridiculous, it looks hilarious, and everybody cracks up and they laugh when you see time reversed. Famous example, if you took a film, a glass falling off a shelf and hitting the floor and breaking, then you reversed it, the broken parts would assemble themselves in midair and then end up a whole glass. And so, of course, that's comedy, because that's something impossible in our universe, the way Allah has created it. But for Allah Ta'ala, the causes and effects, all time is easily observable by Allah Ta'ala, just as if we were to observe a film, the stills of that film, and we could see all parts of it, all the interrelationship, the whole story, as well as all the details. And so when you're looking at it that way, it's not counterintuitive at all. It's only when you take the film and run it backwards that it looks wrong to us, because that's not the natural world which we are familiar with. And so because they're not satisfied with Allah's decree, the way Allah has created this universe before you and I were even born, He created all of this, and we are experiencing our little part of this universe. We see time, we see in our time, we see causes and effects. We do things. I make decisions and then I carry them out successfully or unsuccessfully, but I don't actually see all of the billions and trillions of interrelationships that affect those decisions of mine. Why do, as they would say famously, the butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, and that causes a hurricane in the North Atlantic? And so we can't understand all of those interrelationships, but Allah, being above and beyond time and space as we know it, observes all of those things and observes them over eternity with no time limit. And so it is easy for Allah Ta'ala to know, and He has the power and knowledge over all things. So the reason and the wisdom of time is that it enables us to form intentions, niyyah, and then make decisions, and then attempt to carry those out, and to learn and grow, learn the lessons from our observations and experiences, and to grow, and if possible, to repent and return back to Allah Ta'ala, and then to increase our knowledge and faith. None of those are possible without the concept of time. And that's why we have to understand that Allah's actions are outside of time, but we see them in time. But our actions are captured here within time, and we experience them. But in fact, they were also created by Allah Ta'ala before the heavens and the earth. So Allah created us and all the actions that we do. Allah said in the Quran, "Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr." By time through the ages, truly the human being is at loss. And so Allah brings as a witness of His power and the truth of His revelation, al-asr, time through the ages. We might understand asr as being our age, our time, a specific time. So we could say asr al-Sahaba, the age of the Sahaba, or al-Usur al-Wusta, the Middle Ages, and the modern age, al-Asr al-Hadith, for example. The word asr, it comes from the idea of pressing grapes and pressing olives, squeezing fruit into juice. So Allah mentioned in the Quran that the companions of Joseph in the prison, that he saw himself, Yasir Khamra, that he is squeezing grapes into the juice, making wine, in other words, for the king. And so asr implies making a khalasa, a concentrate, a pure concentrate out of the fruit, taking all that is beneficial and good from that and putting it in its most concise form. And so Allah called the clouds, which contain the rain before they fall upon us, rain-bearing clouds, al-mu'sirati, once again coming from the word asr. The windstorms, terrible storms, saw. And so al-asr and isr, ad-dahr, all of it mean time. Also, we use asr specifically for the late afternoon before evening. And especially in time, it's time in relation to the changes and alterations that take place therein. And so that shows us the revelatory nature of time, that we see the divine wisdom unfolding in time. And so if you take a look at the revelations of the Quran, it's very time related. We look for the asbab al-nuzul, the causes behind the revelations. This verse of the Quran was revealed in response to a particular event. So the meanings of the verses of the Quran are related to historical changes in time. And so if we said Surat al-Fil, the chapter of the elephant, that's directly related to the year of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, when Abraha the Ethiopian conqueror of Yemen sent an army with elephants to destroy the Kaaba, the house of Allah Ta'ala in Mecca. And so what that does is index those particular verses to historical events. And we use that to interpret the Quran in relation to changes. We see that one part of the Quran verses are revealed in Mecca before the Hijrah, before the migration to Medina, and the other part is revealed afterwards. And so that directly affects the subject matter of those verses. And we see changes in the approach to the practice of Islam in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, related to the time. So that those verses revealed before the Hijrah are clearly differentiated from those afterwards. And verses before are very universal, very general, and they are mostly about beliefs and ethics and morals, and specific ritual laws and other types of laws and details are revealed in a later time because of the changes in safety and security and power in the region that happened after that. And so we couldn't understand the Quran fully without understanding it in the concept of time through the ages, the development of time. And so the times of the Quran contrasted between Mecca and Medina, and between the times of the Injil, the Gospel, and previous, the Zabur, the Psalms, and previous to that, the Torah, looking at the development of monotheism historically over time, from the most ancient times, from Adam, Hawa, Eve, Noah, and up to Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq, Moses, and the development over the history of the prophets. And we look at the historical development of Tashri' Islami, development of Islamic legislation in time, from the time of the Prophet and the peace be upon him and the Sahaba, the Khulafa Rashidin, the four righteous Imams and leaders of the Muslim Ummah, and the development over the generations by our Imams and scholars. And so we understand the wholeness of Islam by looking at the detailed development, cause, and effect over time. And what that teaches us is that it's essential for us to understand Islam as a whole through looking at the text of the Quran and Sunnah, but without looking at the details and the development and the relationship with the continuity of continuous development of time, then we can't see the details. And that's the problem with people. If you don't see the development of details over time, then you can't understand the whole universal aspect of Islam as well. So without understanding the details, you can't understand the whole. At the same time, you can't understand the whole until you understand the details. You can't understand the details unless they're in relationship with the whole. And so that's a paradox. And it's difficult for us as human beings, so we have to do both of those things. In our time, we have a problem between extremism and fundamentalism, modernism and moderation, and all of those issues today. Extremists and fundamentalists try to understand Islam as if time stood still 14 centuries ago. But in fact, only Allah is above and beyond time. When we ignore the development of time, the development of Sharia and Islamic laws and understanding, we are blind to the revelation of Allah Ta'ala within a dahar, within al-asr, within time as it develops through the ages. So when I ignore Allah's teaching through time, is if I am cursing Allah, turning my back on Allah Ta'ala. And so Allah told us that historical development, time, and its changes through the ages is a direct instrument controlled by Allah Ta'ala to teach us and guide us. And as we embrace change and adapt to it following Islamic Shari'i principles, we are then fully embracing Islam completely in our own time and place. And if we turn our back upon it, pretending that the universe is static, there's no development in Islamic law and teaching and understanding, it's as if we are dead, a solid rock, unaffected by the world around us, and that's impossible. Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. Allah alone is the one, and Allah alone is a Samad, which means He is unchanging, unaffected, but He changes everything and affects everything. And so when we pretend that we are unaffected and unchanged, we are actually committing a blasphemy against Allah Ta'ala. But He is the one who has made us go through the changes and development over time. And so we'll continue next week on this subject, inshallah. But the summary is that part of understanding Sharia and the development is to understand the development and adaptation in Islamic laws, in jurisprudence, are part of the revelation of Allah Ta'ala through the development of time. And as we embrace change and we embrace the adaptability and flexibility within Sharia, we are embracing the fullness of Islam. And as we embrace rigidity and turn our back on historical reality, then we are rejecting the revelation of Allah Ta'ala through time, through ad-dahr and through al-asr. And therefore we are not fully embracing Islam. Our iman is compromised and weak. And the more things change and we reject and we remain unmoved like a rock, then the weaker our iman and ilm, our faith and knowledge become, and our ability to understand Islam and apply it in our lives becomes seriously compromised. May Allah Almighty protect us and guide all of us. May Allah Almighty continue to enlighten us and make Islam an inspiration for you and your family and all of our community in today and tomorrow and all time. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum